Back with more from Freedom Fest. Tonight's guests have been skeptical of some so-called obstacles to the American dream. But there's one thing that really does get in the way of the dream, and that's government. When government grows, freedom to try things shrinks, and big government just kills many an American dream. And that's why the Cato Institute's Chris Edwards and Dan Mitchell gave a talk at this conference earlier called Human Progress and Downsizing Government. So this has been your theme for a long time, but it gets in the way of human progress?
Oh, absolutely. The federal government, $4 trillion in spending this year. It's got 2,300 different subsidy programs. All of those subsidy programs.
Human progress.
No. All those subsidy programs, they cause damage and they harm the economy. They make people dependent. They reduce our freedom. And I'll give you one example. I mean, farmers, they're happy to get $20 billion a year from the government, but it reduces their freedom because with the spending comes all these regulations on what farmers can farm and how and all this sort of stuff. So federal spending comes with regulations. It reduces our freedom. That's in addition to all the damage that the taxes do.
People don't get that. Spending is spending for job training, for food stamps that help people achieve the dream.
You have to look at the difference between intentions and results. Every dollar the government spends, they have to get it from someplace. They either tax it out of the private economy, borrow it, or they just print money and debase the existing currency. As government gets big in terms of consuming more and more of our economic output, the growth rate falls. There's a reason why countries like France and Italy grow slower than us. But there's also a reason why Hong Kong and Singapore grow faster. There's a very clear negative relationship between human progress, i.e. economic growth, and the size of government.
And America grew fastest when we had a little government.
Oh, that's right. In fact, government spending was under 4% of the economy all the way up through Calvin Coolidge in the 1920s. It was the 1930s that made all the difference. It was the invention of Keynesian economics, the invention of so-called entitlement programs.
We grew faster before the 1930s?
Absolutely we did. We grew much faster.
But we had the Depression.
We had recessions, but the government stayed out of it, and we always recovered very quickly. Like there's a big recession in the early 1920s. Harding and then Coolidge didn't do anything about it, and the economy recovered very quickly and started growing.
People say, without big government, we destroy the planet.
No, in fact, a lot of federal spending damages the environment. California's had this terrible drought. It is partly the responsibility of the federal government that has been subsidizing water for a century now. It's caused overconsumption. Farmers are farming things they shouldn't be farming. They're over-consuming water. So that is one of the roots of the problem here, that subsidies cause distortion and economic damage. Some of the biggest polluters have been federal government agencies.
Now, a lot of Republicans are saying we have to balance the budget. Dan, you say that's not politically realistic, and we don't even have to balance the budget.
If you say balance the budget, the average politician will say, sure, I'll raise your taxes. What we really need to focus on is simply having government grow slower than the private sector over time. Countries that have done that have been very, very successful. There's a big, long list of them. Whereas if you say to the leftist friends, oh, hey, show us your list of countries that have had success with raising taxes, they don't have anything. They have countries like Greece and France and Italy.
But you're saying don't shrink government? It just it'll continue to grow just more slowly than the economy?
Well, look, at the Cato Institute, we want government to shrink dramatically. But here's all we need to do to make progress. Just have it grow at, say, 2% a year if the private sector is growing 3 or 4% a year. You maintain that for any significant period of time, and the burden of government will shrink as a share of GDP.
And amazingly, for every year since the 30s, government has grown more than inflation and population growth.
And, our debt now is far higher than it has ever been in our peacetime history. It's, as Thomas Jefferson and James Madison thought, it's immoral, it's bad for the economy, and it's corrupting, and we ought to end it.
Thank you, Chris Edwards and Dan Mitchell.